we were playing with it a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we can get this started now. I'm going to be talking about effective landscape use of native plants, and this is pretty basic. These are basic concepts that actually work for any kind of landscaping, but there are a few differences with the natives. I want to start off with a short video from Doug Tallamy talking about one of the common mistakes that we make when we do our landscaping. So we tested this, so I'm hoping it works. Let me know if you can't hear.
The ability for ecosystems to function in our managed landscapes and our suburban urban matrix is very poor because we have landscape primarily for looks. We've treated plants as if they were decorations and forgotten all about their ecological roles. So we've sacrificed the ability of all of the land that we've used for our suburban neighborhoods to make ecosystem services that not only support other creatures, but they support us as well. And that's one of the reasons that we're doing the research we're doing. We're trying to generate enough data to convince people that these landscapes can be highly productive. If you produce plants that insects cannot reproduce on and develop on, you are creating a really depauperate ecosystem. What this homeowner has done is put the plants back into the suburban landscape. Most of these plants are indigenous. They are native to this area, which means they are important components of the food webs that originally were in this area. So you have lots of wildlife around, and these plants are filtering our water. They're sequestering carbon. They're supporting food webs. They are supporting the pollinators that keep those plants around. They're producing oxygen. All of the ecosystem services that plants provide are now happening right in this yard because it's not one vast lawn. When I think of best plants, I think of what those plants are doing. And in almost every instance, oaks come out on top. In our region of the country, the mid-Atlantic states, oaks support 534 species of caterpillars. And remember, the birds are eating those caterpillars. So that's 534 species of bird food coming from the oak in your front yard. There's no other tree that does it better. Just for comparison's sake, if you had a ginkgo in your yard, which is from Asia, it supports one species of caterpillar. So there's a huge difference in the productivity of these particular trees. I care about this because we need these other living things to run the ecosystems that we depend on as humans. So we can think of this as we're not making a sacrifice. It's absolutely necessary to keep the ecosystems running that support us. So it's for humans.
Okay. So what does Dr. Tallamy say is our biggest mistake in our landscapes? What do we do?
Plant lawns.
Huh?
Plant lawns.
Well, yeah, but just
Plant invasives.
he didn't mention invasives, really.
No, I guess not.
Yeah, right at the very beginning. Listen again, right at the beginning.
The ability for ecosystems to function in our managed landscapes and our suburban urban matrix is very poor because we have landscape primarily for looks. We've treated plants as if they were decorations and forgotten all about their ecological roles.
So what do we do?
Planting for looks.
Planting for looks. And what have we forgotten?
The ecological.
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 The other critters.
Yes. So that's one of the biggest changes if you use natives, is that you will be planting for the ecological benefit of the critters. But we also need to get beyond just looks, having to have a certain color or that kind of stuff. Not to say that you can't, but that shouldn't be your primary purpose as you are planting. So I know I'm talking to the choir, but I'm going to reiterate the benefits of a native garden. Less water. You don't have to water them as much. They're used to our climate. You don't have to use the pesticides and the fertilizers because they are adapted to many of the bugs that we've got. Now, we do have some new ones coming in. We're importing bugs as well as plants. And sometimes it does get bad and you might have to use a pesticide. But for the most part, you can go organic. And once you get your lawn in balance, it works. You will have a lower impact on everything around you because what you're planting is what ought to be there. And you're not using too much water. You're not having chemicals that are unnecessary. You will be providing for wildlife habitat, so the critters can live in your yard and you get to watch the birds and the hummingbirds and the butterflies and the lizards and all that kind of good stuff. And overall, it just preserves what our ecoregion is supposed to look like. And with all the development, personally, I think the word development, it needs to be changed. I'm not so sure what's happening is development, because that's supposed to be a positive thing. But with all the quote development that is going on, with all the new people moving in and land being converted to houses, preserving the look of our ecoregion is important. It really is. So why using native plants can be different? They are different. First of all, and this is really important, you got to know about them and you have to know where they come from, because you want to plant plants that are native to your ecoregion. Now, officially, that means within 50 miles of where you are living. That's a very strict definition of ecoregion. And probably 99% of us don't really go by that. We plant some things that are native, but they might not have grown here originally. They do fine, and they do help the ecosystem. You have to understand that interaction between plants and the critters. You want to plant so that you have flowers or seeds or food all year round. So you need to think not just in terms of a beautiful spring bloom, but you need to think of what will be blooming in the summer, in the fall, what will be there in the wintertime right now for the critters, for them to eat, for them to live. So it takes some thinking to be sure that you have all these things going. Helicopter gardeners are unnecessary. We all love our plants, but natives really don't require a lot of hovering over. I had a friend who said they never wanted to grow a plant that was so finicky it had a whole society named for it, like African violets or a bunch of the others that, they're so delicate, you have to know all this stuff. Natives are not particularly delicate if you're planting the right ones. And overall, gardening with native plants is easier if you know how to do it right. In other words, getting the right things in the right spot. Now, just a note about the pictures. I tried to put down at the bottom or to the side what the plants were. So, if you have a question, does everybody know how to use chat?
No.
Okay. Well, in a future time, it's easier to, down at the bottom of your screen or at the top, one or the other.
Got a note from someone.
I do. And Jenny, could you keep up with that? Because I can't keep up with chat and talk at the same time. I haven't mastered that skill. But if you could, let me know what they're asking. But the Gulf penstemon are these kind of purpley things here. Right here, the little yellow is the beginning of Calilophus. The big pretty daisy looking ones is Engelmann daisy. And the pink ones back here are evening primrose. And the other thing I would ask, if y'all would mute yourselves, because if you blurt in while other people are talking, nobody gets to hear. So if y'all could hit mute and use chat and let Jenny ask the questions, I'd appreciate it. So many of the traditional garden practices are unneeded. For instance, amending the soil. If you're planting the right plant from that ecosystem, the soil you're going to put it in is what it needs and wants. You don't have to add that extra stuff. Double digging, and this lady down here in the bottom right is in the process of double digging. And talk about messing up all the critters that live in the soil and contribute to the fertility of your soil. You have just messed their homes up so badly. It's going to take them a while to reestablish, because research has shown that the different tiny microorganisms that live in the soil all live at different levels, and they interact with each other, but they have to be in the right sequence to do that. And when you double dig and you really mess them up good, same thing goes for tilling. that really amongst the more native and the more organic gardeners has gone out of style, which I don't know about y'all, but my back really appreciates that. I would rather not have to do that.
A question, Dee Dee.
Yes,
The photographs of the yard and are they from your garden?
yes,
Thank you.
yep. Most of them are. It's either the Schertz garden or my New Braunfels garden.
Right.
I'll let you know if they're not. None of these on this page are from my garden. You don't have to be poisoning pests as much. You don't need chemical fertilizer at all. Compost is wonderful. It will do more for your garden than any chemical fertilizer. And I don't know if you realize it, but chemical fertilizer is actually a salt. And as it breaks down into your soil, it adds salt to it, which is not good for most plants, which is why up in the Great Plains where they grow, huge areas with greens and whatever, and they've used a ton of chemical fertilizers, they have almost sterilized their soil. It's really sad. So not a good practice. And cold weather protection. Now, I'm not talking vegetables. Vegetables, for the most part, are not native. But for your native plants, you don't need to do this covering stuff. In Snowmageddon last February, I did not lose any of my natives. And I even had columbines that were setting buds to bloom. And those buds bloomed. They're tough. I had some other things that I thought was dead for sure, and they came back. Now some were a little slow, but they came back. I did lose some non-native things. I lost my barrel cactus. I was so upset. So these are the traditional practices that you don't need to do. So basic landscape styles. I'm going to do this really fast. I've done this for y'all before, but it's just a review. You can do any of these styles with your natives. One is the formal, which is definitely controlling nature. You'll notice everything is very geometric. It is very closely clipped. It is very balanced. It doesn't look like anything you would find naturally in nature. It is also very high maintenance because of all of the trimming and the whatever you have to do. And I would be willing to bet all the ones that I see in this picture, and this is not my yard, I think are non-natives. So not only is it high maintenance and whatever, it also uses a lot of non-natives. Informal. This is softer. It doesn't have to have that balance. It's a more asymmetrical balance that you have. You don't have the strict design rules that you have in the more formal. It looks more natural. That's the whole idea. It's curvy, which is more like nature, not such hard angles. You oftentimes don't use as much hardscape as you would use in a more formal garden, although you can use hardscape. It doesn't mean you can't. And you allow the plants to grow in their natural shape. You're not going to see any hard, as several landscape architects refer to, green meatballs or green cubes in an informal landscape. And then you have a wildscape, which is truly free form. It's just, whatever comes. There can be, there need to be some things that show, like this bottom picture. And again, neither one of these are mine. But it's made for wildlife. It gives all the basics that they need: food, water, and shelter in that landscape. But it's not a sanctuary. It's just a type of landscaping. Now, the one thing you have to remember is that your city weed rules do apply. You have to go by that, and probably HOAs would have a hissy fit over this. And you need to keep wildfire safety in mind. You don't want anything that would burn easily. So these are three very basic. This is the kind of the going to the edge of each one. You can do any of these you want with your natives. So just keep that in the back of your mind. All right, the good landscaping practices. Right place, right plant in the right place. That means its sun exposure is correct. You have it in the type of soil that it likes, and it is appropriate for your ecoregion. This is where some of that plant knowledge comes in. If y'all have not discovered the database at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, it's great, wildflower.org, and you click on Find Plants. Good pictures, lots of information about what kind of growing conditions the various plants want. So it's a great resource to use so that you get the right plant in the right place. If you succeed in doing that, your life is going to be much easier. Remember to go easy on water. First of all, we have limited water. And as more people move in, it's going to be even more limited. It gets expensive. And actually, we tend to kill more plants with too much water than too little. And if you're planting the native plants, most of them don't want a lot of water, and you really will kill them quickly. Blackfoot daisy is one that pops to mind immediately. You water that one very much, and it will turn up its toes and die. It's like, no, don't do that to me. The other thing is mulch. Now, some of the new ideas that are coming in landscaping is not just the mulch, which is good. There's nothing wrong with organic mulch. But what some of the new landscape architects are pushing is that you let nature cover everything. And what they're going back to is that you'll notice if you go out into, quote, in nature, there's not much bare soil. There is something growing on everything. And nature just doesn't like bare soil. If we're doing mulching, one of the reasons we do mulch is to control weeds. And so you don't have that green cover that nature puts in. So one of the things, instead of using as much mulch, which you have to spread and renew and whatever, buy, you might think about using some ground covers that would do the very same thing with a lot less effort. Leave a little messiness. I know we have a lot of neat freaks. I tend to be a neat freak, and I've had to slap my hands to say, whoa, would that really happen in nature? Can I live with that for just a little while? I'm having a hard time because we've had our freeze, and I would really like to get out there and clean that mess up, but I haven't. Now, these are all from my yard, and the bottom right is one of my flower beds right now, and that's the one that's just driving me nuts. But there is a reason that things look the way they do, and it has a purpose, because all those dead seed heads are food for the birds and the other critters. Those dead stalks that are fairly large and they're hollow, those are used for native bees and other insects to lay their eggs in those stems. Leaves that have fallen on the ground. Many of the smaller critters use those leaves as shelter. The dead bushes are shelter from the wind. In fact, it's forecast that we're going to have some pretty bad winds coming up this weekend. So that's what all that gives our critters. But also leave a little bit of bare ground. If you'll notice this middle slide with the lizard sticking out of it, that's an alligator lizard. I have several of them that live in the yard. And this was a female that had dug herself a hole in my vegetable garden and laid eggs. And I caught her in the midst of it. I got a few pictures. I was excited. But she quickly covered it up and took off. So I guess those eggs hatched. I don't know. Who knows? But anyway, a little messiness is good. And piles of brush like this at the top right, that will give birds, it'll give small animals and some of your better insects a place to hide and to burrow into the ground. Sometimes there's food there if you've thrown in things that have seeds on them. So a little messiness for the wildlife is good. When you're planting, tall plants to the back. I know that sounds dumb and obvious, but how many of us have made that mistake? We put something toward the front of the flower bed that got really huge. Oops. And we covered up some of the smaller things that were around it. So this mountain laurel is over here. This was my shirt's house. It's up close to the house. So there's nothing to the back of it. Everything came to the front. This wax myrtle is in the corner of the fence where I really wanted it to spread out and cover things. You'll notice there is a smaller plant in front of it. And this over on the left, you'll notice the taller things are to the back, as this is the common sunflower back here, which is a wonderful plant for birds. They love this sucker. And then this is a cressida, which in the fall is wonderful for butterflies. But you'll notice there are shorter plants, not short, but shorter toward the front. And if you go by the tall plants to the back, it's kind of like, I don't know, when you were in school and growing up and everybody said, okay, all the tall people in the back, short ones in the front. Same idea. Think of that. Mix up your hedges. One of the trends in landscaping is instead of doing, 10 of one thing, mix it up. It's more interesting. The wildlife likes it better too. This is my back flower bed here at the house I'm living in now. And it's mixed up. I've got Cenizo, I've got both a male and a female possum haw. The possum haw in this picture is the male. The female is to the far left. You can't see it. There was a big red sage thrown in there and a beauty berry. Love my beauty berry. And interesting, you'll notice in this picture in the background back here, there is a ginormous tree. That was my neighbor's, and it died in Snowmageddon. He has now cut it down, which has really changed the ecosystem that I'm dealing with on my back fence because I don't have that shade coming in on it. And this past year, my beauty berry did okay because it got a ton of sun. It's too big to move. I can't dig that thing out. It's been there for years. So I'm hoping that it can make do with the more sun that it's suddenly getting. However, some of these other things, I'm enjoying it. Another way to show that you are landscaping is to use what is called cues of care. Now, this was, again, a term a landscape architect referred to, and I thought, okay, that's interesting. And what it is, it shows that you have done something, that what you're doing is intentional. It's not a vacant lot. You're not just turning it loose. You have a plan. So you can do something like in this left picture. This was a house in Fredericksburg. They have stepping stones to show that that is their front walk going to their front door. This was, and yes, they did plant some plants in places that you might not expect, but they meant to do it. That wasn't an accident. If you have a grassy area, a small prairie, you could do a mowed walkway so that you would show, I meant to do this. No drinking. You could add a birdhouse or a bird bath. That shows that you meant, or you can have a funny little sign. My daughters decided to fix me one last Christmas. It's a cute little rusty sign that says, grow, damn it. Oh, my daughters. Plant in groups. There's something about the human eye. We like odd numbers, 3, 5, 7, or 1. So if you're going to only plant one plant, make sure it is a specimen plant, a big one that makes a statement. The spider lily does that. This is in my backyard right now. And this is the one that I thought after Snowmageddon, it was gone, but it was not. It started putting out green leaves on top of the mush that was there after everything had melted. And it bloomed this year. So tough little plant. The cone flowers over here, this was at my other house. That's a whole grouping of them. I don't really know how many is in that grouping, but it's not just one, all strewn along there. So it makes a statement. Your critters will like it better too. Research has shown that pollinators like it when the plants of one kind are kind of bunched together, because it means they don't have to fly or move around as much. I mean, they're as lazy as we are, so they can get it all in one stop. That's great. This is another example, the Hinckley's columbine here. That is several Hinckley's columbine. There's probably 5 or 7 of them all bunched in there. And then the red yucca, which has lots of blooms on it, but that's only one plant. That was lovely. Sad to say, that was at my Shirt's house, and the guy that bought it dug that out.
Mm.
My
That's
God.
that was a major operation. I don't know why he didn't just leave it. It was gorgeous, I thought. But that's a good specimen plant. And over on the left, these plants that are in bloom, this is at my daughter's house in Austin, is Texas aster, which just bloom, 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 gets tall, puts up with anything, will grow just about anywhere in the shade, semi-shade, full sun, doesn't care. But that's a whole line of those plants across the back of her house that are just, it's in the fall and they're blooming like mad. And on the other side, this is Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. And this is a good example of how they have made large clumpings of the same plant. Because you'll notice over here on the right, all of the cone flowers. And then down here toward the bottom, there's a little bit, it looks like there may be lantana that got cut off in the picture. But then out to the side of it, lots of the wine cups. And then back in the middle there looks like the mealy blue sage. And then another grouping of the coneflower. And then to the back, they put their tall things. They put their trees, their little trees. So this is a perfect example of what I've been talking about. Use wide beds. Planting beds ultimately are less maintenance than a lawn. And I know there are a lot of people who go, oh, it's always more trouble. No, it's not. Stop and think. You've got to mow and edge that lawn about once a week. That's a lot. It takes several hours to mow it and edge it and clean it up. A bed you might clean up twice a year and you're done, especially if you're using things that keep growing, if you're using perennials or shrubs. So this was at my Shirt's house. That bed is 6 feet wide from the fence. And I know that because I had a 12-foot utility easement starting at the fence and running toward my house. And I put my edging down at 6 feet and cut my phone line. They hadn't buried it very well. So that was a rude awakening. Then this bottom bed down here, this is again at my daughter's house. It's running along the side of her garage. And then she just decided to put in a walkway that went along the property line. So she has no mowing whatsoever. The other thing she caught on to, this is Cressida that's in bloom right here. And she has, I can't remember what all else. I think she's got some rose pavonia and I think tropical sage on down there. She realized that if she would keep this trimmed along the edge so it didn't hang over the walkway, she got a lot fewer volunteers coming up in that gravel. So one of those things that you learn as you go. But your beds are going to use less water, fertilizer, chemicals, everything than a lawn, because mainly you're going to need compost and mulch. If you've once established a lot of these things, you don't have to water if they're natives. They know how to live on what we get from the rain. So recommendation is around the perimeter of your yard, try for 5-foot beds. That gives you plenty of room to put in taller stuff to the back and shorter stuff in the front. And the beds around the foundation of your house. In fact, I had a home inspector tell me on a house that we bought, he said, you need to put a flower bed in here because you're starting to have a little bit of foundation problems. And he knew that if I put in a flower bed, I'd water it and keep the ground moist. So try to go at least 3 feet around your house, wider if you can. And that is not only good for the plants and for your maintenance, it's also good for your foundation. Think layers. Different creatures live at different heights in your landscape. So you start high. This is an oak tree. This is I don't know which oak. It was my neighbor's oak. This is my Shirt's house. And this was a red oak that I put in. So I had the tall trees in the front and a lot of birds. I had the doves that would nest in those trees, and they make the crummiest nest I have ever seen. And I regularly had to pick up broken eggs that had rolled out of their nests. I don't know how they ever reproduced, but they love the trees. They would build those shoddy nest there. Then you have the medium. This is a red bud right here, and tall perennials and some shrubs. There were shrubs around the perimeter of the house, a few over here by the driveway, and of course there's that red yucca. So different heights there, tall perennials, and then the low ones long here by the hell strip by the street, where you had this. This is the Greg's mistflower. There was some Zexminia in here, and I don't remember what the rest was. And you can't really, I think that's Damianito right there. But shorter things so that you have something for everybody. So the birds that want tall trees, they got them. For the birds that like cardinals, for instance, will tend to nest in mountain laurels because they don't like the tall trees. They like shrubs. Then there are others like the Inca doves that nest on the ground. So you have a little bit, and for the other critters that'll be coming in, you give them what they need or they want. And this is my house right now. So again, here are the trees, nice and tall along the street. Unfortunately, I had to cut down, this was a ratama over here on the left, because my oak tree and my neighbor's oak tree, which you can't see way over here to the side, were growing together and just smothering it. And I had to cut it out. I really hated that because I like that ratama. Shrubs, there's shrubs here in the front. There's shrubs along in this flower bed. Perennials, got some taller ones along here by the street. There's some in the beds. And then ground cover, had some horse herb along there. So you see the different levels that are there. Use perennials. This is your backbone. And it's because you don't have to keep replacing these dudes. They will continue to grow and expand, give you babies. You can move elsewhere, share with your friends, sell at your plant sale, and keep going and just be lovely. The other thing that has been discovered in some of the climate change and things that we can do to reduce climate change, your annual flowers and your bedding plants that you buy at the nursery are some of the most ecologically costly that you can come up with, because many of them are grown in greenhouses, which require lots of chemicals and heat to get them up so that they're ready to sell in the spring. They grow for a short period of time, do their thing, die, you pull them out. So the carbon they might have sequestered, you're now pulling out. Now you're going to dig a hole and put something else in that will grow in the next season. And when you keep doing this each season, yes, it is lovely, but it costs a lot ecologically to do it. They're going to require more water because they have to, these new ones have to establish. They're not going to come back on their own unless you can put up with seed forming, which is generally not real pretty. So perennials really are the way to go. Now, if you have some breaks amongst your perennials, you can throw in some annual wildflowers if you've got good sun. So there are many ways you can do this. And what I've got here, this yellow flower over here on the right is the Plateau Goldeneye, which is a fall bloomer, as is frostweed. So these were together in the backyard. This is fall aster, which just outdoes itself. And in the background, there's some autumn sage. And then over here on the left is the yellow Maximilian sunflower and the blue Greg's mistflower, both of them great butterfly plants. Some more perennials. This on the left is a mountain sage. It's just one. It's a specimen plant, blooms in the fall, has a lovely red bloom, and will put up with some shade. It said on the Ladybird's database, it could grow in full shade, but I have found that not to be true. You'll notice this kind of leans to the right. That's where the sun is. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of reaching out like, I need more sun. But up here in the middle, that is some columbine, and then all this stuff at the top is covering it, sorry. This is, again, spring bloomers. Frog fruit. Did you know that you can do frog fruit in a hanging basket? Believe it or not, it will. It'll grow, and it's not bad. And then over here on the right is Turk's cap. That grows just about anywhere, and the hummingbirds just adore it. Grasses. Grasses are really underused. Many of them do take a bit of room, and many of us don't have yards big enough to do very many grasses. But on the left, this is the Lindheimer's muley, or the big muley. This is my house right now. A single one of these will cover 5 or 6 foot circle, diameter circle, a lot of space. And they are gorgeous in the fall when they put up all of these seed heads. Now over on the right, this is my daughter's house in Austin. She had nothing but carpet grass out here, and she's slowly but surely taken it all out. So we were looking, her front walk comes along here, and then her back door is back toward the back of the house. So it's a nice curvy swooping thing. And so we put in, this is the Gulf muley, which doesn't get as big as the Lindheimers. And then this is fall, where it's blooming, and it has that gorgeous pinky burgundy look to it. She has all of her neighbors stopping to say, "What is that?" And she has it mulched with crushed granite. And let me tell you, everything comes up in crushed granite if you don't already know that. And these things throw seeds like you won't believe. So our plant sale in our chapter always has Gulf muley, because I go dig it out of my daughter's yard. But it is lovely, and it stays green all year. Some more grasses that are underused is Indian grass. This is Indian grass in the fall when its seed heads have this lovely golden color. It is just spectacular. And then on the right, this is your inland sea oats, which will grow in the shade. And the beauty of these drooping heads that it's got, give, whenever the wind blows, it gives really pretty, it's kind of like wind chimes that don't make any noise, because these are all hanging down. But it's really nice motion that you can see in the garden with these. Then you can use your annuals. This is horse mint over here. It's a Monarda, Monarda citriodora. It's lovely. The pollinators love it. They all like the Monarda family. Evidently has really good pollen. But you have to go through what I call the ugly period, and that's the center picture. Because if you want your annuals to come back, you have to let them go to seed, and the seed has to mature. It has to turn brown. So it's ugly there for a while. But be aware, that's what you have to put up with if you want to grow annuals and have them come back on their own, which they will do. And then over here, the blue bonnets, those you had to let them go until they were brown and ugly. You know, and everybody said, "Oh, what beautiful blue bonnets," when they look like this. I got some looks from the neighbors when they were turning brown, and I was waiting for their seed heads to fully mature. But that's what you have to remember. They have to go to seed if you want to get them back next year. I guess if you don't want to do that, you can go ahead and pull them out, but then you're going to have to buy more seed. And don't forget pots, big pots. You have to get big pots if you're going to do your natives. One of the reasons natives can survive is that they've got root systems on them, and they've got to have room to develop that root system. So we're talking big pots here. This one is by my driveway right now. It's a Greg's Dahlia. It went through Snowmageddon in that pot and did just fine. It's come back. It's been a little slow coming back, but it didn't kill it. Now this one is a Devil's Shoestring, which is really pretty, and you can get a taller pot so that it drapes, and it's a lovely, graceful form. You can even grow Blackfoot Daisy in a pot. Now I'm sure the soil in that pot drains very, very well. It is not rich. It doesn't have a whole lot of humus in it, because that's not what Blackfoot Daisy likes. And again, that's where you gotta know your plants to get them to succeed. You got to give them what they want. And basically a Blackfoot Daisy wants crummy soil. And if you do anything more, you kill them. I've done it. I'll testify to that. And then over here, this is silver ponyfoot. You can do this in a hanging basket. This was just a big pot that I had on my porch rail. The one thing I found out is that every spring, the sparrows love to harvest this and use it in their nests. So every spring, this thing would get really cropped back pretty badly. But then once they had their nest done, they allowed it to grow, and it was really quite pretty. So where do you buy your natives? Well, let's see, where would you get your natives? I don't know if y'all remember this, but this was one of our plant sales on the square. And you will see some people that you may recognize. And then once you have bought your plants, enjoy your efforts. Sit down and enjoy what you have done. This was a pollinator garden that Monta Zingerle took us to visit many years ago. Questions?
Deedy, do you want people to use the chat or unmute and ask you?
Probably the chat is better because people, you can't tell when somebody else is going to talk. I see 3 chats. Do you want me just to take them?
Yes, I don't